Hey, I'm Adam,
Oh, I'm Dave.
and this is Fiction.
Or nonfiction.
Cue music.
Or nonfiction.
Hey, so this is the program where we take urban legends, viral news stories, and purported truths, examine them to find out if they're actually true or not, if they happen to be fiction or.
Nonfiction.
And today we have a very special episode, Dave, one that's very close to our hearts, a tale of a haunting, of multiple hauntings of one particular road.
Texas Road.
Texas Road, that's right. Legends have gone on about Texas Road's reported hauntings for generations, and this is the show that's going to uncover the truth behind it. That's right, Windsor Public Library's Fiction or Nonfiction is going to be the definitive source unpacking whether these hauntings are true or not.
That's scary.
I'm very scared.
I'm
But
scared.
Dave, don't worry, we have some reassurance. We have a friend here to help us out. We have Erica. Welcome to the show, Erica.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this.
So we wanted to bring you on because we know you have a little bit of an interest in the paranormal, in hauntings, and specifically the hauntings of Texas Road.
I would say that's very, very fair.
So before we get into any details, I'm kind of curious, what do you know about Texas Road, and do you have any personal experiences with being haunted when traveling down this road, or any secondhand accounts you may have known from friends or family about Texas Road?
So I didn't really know about Texas Road until the 90s when I started working for the Parks and Rec department and with day camps. And it was one of the staff that first told me about Texas Road. I mean, you kind of heard things, but he's like, no, you have to go out there and experience it. And we did. And he's a very like black and white hard-nosed person, and he swears, and I believe him, that he would hear hooves, like horse carriage out there by the bridge area. So that was my first when we were out there, and he was legitimately terrified. Like for years I thought maybe he was just joking with me until we went out there, and he was legitimately scared.
Did you ever have a first-hand account of any sort of spooky shenanigans happening at Texas Road?
So not to me directly, but I will say there's an eeriness out there, and I mean I call myself a skeptical believer because I think there is something out there that can't be explained, but at the same time I really need something like more hardcore proof. But I will say going out there there's just something eerie about that spot, and is it confirmation bias because of all these stories and you want to believe it, or is there something out there? And I think that's the big question, but it's still it's darker out there. There's a different vibe once you hit it's more the end of the road when you hit the dead end spot there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dave, you have some experience out on Texas Road yourself, don't you?
I do?
Yeah, you gave me a very scary story on a previous episode. Why don't you
Yeah.
restate that for people who may have missed that?
Well, it's not really a scary story, but like I was near the Texas Road, near the bridge area, and yeah, I heard some creepy sounds, and it sounded like a possessed duck. Not as scary, still kind of creepy, but yeah, I wasn't there too long.
You know, for the sake of scientific posterity, could you actually mimic that sound that you heard?
I can't. I really can't.
Was it like...
It was.
No?
It was,
Okay.
It was an otherworldly sound.
We are here to unpack the legends behind Texas Road, and, you know, in my experience, I've heard a lot of secondhand accounts from people saying it's haunted, it's creepy, there's something going on there, but I haven't heard a lot of direct references to specific legends. I had to do a little bit of digging around. Just before I get into this, I'm just wondering if either one of you knows of a particular story of the haunting or a story of the origin of why this place might be haunted.
I thought it had something to do with the graveyard back there, because if you sort of follow the path and like there's the end of the road, and you are trespassing when you go, but let's make that very clear. But once you follow the road past sort of the wooded area and it loops around and there's farm there's a graveyard back there. And I always thought it had something to do with that graveyard.
Okay, so the graveyard, and I do know from personal experience as a youngster, definitely not respecting boundaries. I know I may have traveled there once or twice in my youth. Dave, what about you? Do you remember any particular stories about the origin of Texas Road's haunting?
Nothing specific, but also the stories I have heard have been connected to things with the graveyard. Like I know kids often would go there, and there's been lots of different stories sourced from there.
Okay, and indeed, the graveyard does seem to be this nexus, this focal point for a lot of the stories. Not always. Mainly, from what I was able to unearth, two stories that try to explain the origin of why Texas Road is haunted. And Erica, I'd actually like to go through one of these with you here. And what we're going to do is go through the story, and we're not here to prove whether ghosts are real or not. They're not, in my opinion. But, that's...
I humbly disagree, but that's fine.
But, I think this is something to clarify about this show, too. We want to be able to prove or disprove things that we can actually verify or discredit. Something like ghost, we're expressing personal opinions. There's no way for us to actually determine that, of course.
I think it comes down to personal experience, too. If you've had an experience, which I have, it does change your perspective a little bit.
And, I have plenty of friends who are believers who are based in their belief by personal experiences as well. So certainly I think there's a lot of merit to that. But I think what's interesting, and we did this for a previous haunting for an inn that they had in Amherstburg. There was a purported story about the origin of why this place was haunted. And it turned out a great majority of the story was true, except the actual location of where this crime that caused the haunting took place didn't actually take place in the inn. So, that made it questionable. Why would a haunting take place in this facility where the crime never took place? Let's actually go through the origins of these myths, of these stories, and figure out if they happened or not. So the first one we're going to go through is the story of the Headless Woman. There exists a tale of a headless woman who lingers around the Texas Road Cemetery. The victim of a car accident, she was decapitated, and she is still searching for her missing head across Texas Road. Some variations of this legend claim that the woman may have been the victim of a farming accident or even murdered by her husband. Either way, this story all ends the same, with the victim of this decapitation forever trying to find her missing head. So, gut reaction, do you think this story might be based on fact?
I question the decapitation by car accident just because of the location of the cemetery. If she's looking for her head, it's not technically on Texas Road. I would buy maybe a farming or murder if there is any validation to that, because there is a farm back there.
Okay, so yeah, there is a farm there, so that may reaffirm the idea that this could have been a farming accident. Dave, what about you? Just first inclination, are you feeling that you believe this story, or do you think it's based in myth and legend?
I think it's a combination of the two. I'm not, because there's three different variations on what happened to this person. I think one of them did happen, and then just over the years, it's kind of spread into the story.
Before we get into some of the research I've unearthed, I always like to just do a little bit of a round robin and see how you would go about trying to find this information yourself, because this show is about informing people how they can develop information literacy skills to perform their own research. Erica, being our guest here, I'd like to ask you first, if you're poised to research this question, the authenticity of this legend, this story, how would you go about performing your research?
I think I would first look at the geographic locations and the dates of these things, right? Like, is it any kind of backstory in there? If it's a car, if they're claiming it's a car, then it's not going to be from, the 19th century. It's going to be relatively recent. Whereas farming or murder might have been given more press at the time. A farming accident may not have. Things like that happen quite a bit in farming communities, and sometimes things, you deal with it. So I think, like Dave said, it's a combination of so many different stories. They may have been one and manifested to other things to help feed the legends and feed the attraction to that area. So I would want to look at geographic locations first and the specific dates that these are coming from.
Very good. And in terms of resources, what type of resources would you consult first?
Definitely archives. So you want to look at the archival evidence on that, newspaper clip, like old school newspaper clippings, which are now mostly digitized. But I don't think you can really start with that until you have some sort of date timeline, or else you're just going to be jumping into a pile of anything and everything. So if you can nail it down to dates, that's where I would start, and then start with reputable places such as the archives of the area, and then newspaper. Depending, obviously. I would assume most of it is probably newspaper, old newspaper clippings.
And I would imagine as well. Okay, so I think I would agree with you. In fact, as you will see when I go through the process of my investigation, that's pretty much what I did. But there was a few other things I also performed. And Dave, I'm just wondering, was there anything you feel Erica missed, or anything that you would have done differently?
I don't think so. I'm just wondering, like, when there is something like this, and you don't really know any of the dates, how do you kind of get started on that?
You see, that is very tricky. So one of the main things to do, as Erica said, is just apply logic to it. If this is an automobile accident, we can narrow it down to a particular frame of time. It's obviously not going to be in the 19th century. We're going to look for 20th century records. If it's a farming accident, we're going to look for basically when settlements of agricultural land really started forming around the region. And so based on those timestamps, then check things like newspaper records, perhaps coroner records, medical records, those sort of things.
Okay.
And really, because we have 3 different iterations, that's essentially what I had to do. I had to check records for car accidents, records for farming accidents, and records for home battery assault and murder. Just going primarily through the car accident myth first. In my research, in which I consulted various local newspapers using keyword searches for automobile accident, car accident, fatality, there have been several fatalities and car accidents on Texas Road. But throughout the research, none of the reported incidents ever resulted in the decapitation of a victim. Likewise, even though I consulted the Amherstburg Echo, the Amherstburg Courier, and the Windsor Star, there has been no report of a murder or farming accident in that area whatsoever, which resulted in a decapitation. Nothing lines up with the story so far. Now, this got me thinking larger scale about the legends of headless specters. You just have to think about the famous one from where, Dave?
Headless Horseman.
Headless Horseman? Yeah, Headless Horseman from Sleepy Hollow. And
The Ichabod Crane.
yeah, well, he wasn't headless. Well, he was by the end. Oh, spoilers! Sorry for
oh.
a 150-year-old story.
Cut
yeah.
cut that part out.
But yeah, these are tales that have been passed throughout North America through colonial settings, and a lot of that really has to do, I feel, with legends just passing over from the original countries where these colonists came from over to the new continent. And given the inconsistency of these tales, they really are folklore at this point, kind of meant to explain bumps in the night and, weird phenomena like will-o'-the-wisp, for example. It's likely, in my estimation, that the real-life fatalities that took place on Texas Road from car accidents were used as fodder to generate local haunting tales. Elements of beheading were added in probably to provide some color and intrigue to an otherwise generic tale of haunting. I'm kind of at a standstill at this point. Nothing really disproving it or validating it. At this point in my research, Erica, what would you recommend I would do?
Well, I mean, I get where I'm sort of in the middle too, because I'm like, why Texas Road? Like, why? There's how many backwooded areas and random roads throughout Windsor, Essex County? Why did Texas Road get the forefront of hauntings and suspicious activity? And as you were talking, I was almost thinking, is it have anything to do with the proximity to Fort Malden? It's on the way out there. It's Fort Malden's supposedly haunted. There's some historic houses there that I know a friend who had an experience in one. So is it because of that area? But I think my gut is go look at the gravestones and see what's back there if you're looking for a specific woman or age group. It's not a huge cemetery, and I don't know if it's used still as a burial site for families now, or if it's just it's full or it's just historic. But my brain goes to see if you can get burial documents and the years, and if there's a woman that seems younger or whatever, and go there and see if there's any stories around that gravesite, because everything, or the cemetery, because everything seems to be centered around that. So what does it have to do with that? And there, like I said, there's farm communities back there. It's hard to nail it down when you know it's probably been added to in layers over time, right? But why Texas Road? Like, why of all the areas is that such the big focus?
And why that graveyard in particular?
And for people that haven't been out there, that road is very, very long. So it's not all of Texas Road. It's the end of Texas Road. So what's back there that sort of made it become a story? And that's where I would probably want to dig deeper.
Dave, at this point, let's use your detective expertise. What would you say would be our next step?
Try to see if there's anyone that kind of specializes in these stories, or maybe from in that area.
Yeah, we have Erica.
No, like, you know what I mean? Like, certain places will have, like, a person that specializes in a certain focus of certain regions in their history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have a local history branch, but is there one in that region?
Well, it's interesting because what I did is a little bit of a divergence from what you're recommending. I decided, let's try to find the earliest recorded record of the sighting of this woman. Now, there have been other reported sightings of ghosts and hauntings around Texas Road going all the way back to the late 1800s, but I'm specifically looking for cases of this female figure. And I actually pulled out something from John Robert Colombo's book, Mysteries of Ontario. He did a lot of investigation about stories of hauntings, paranormal events, cryptic sightings, and he says disturbances may date back as far as the 1960s, when, as one explanation has it, as a Halloween prank, kids pulled a wire and then a white bedsheet across the road, startling motorists. So this right here gives me something to go on. It could have been simply a prank, as a lot of people would suspect it would be. So I decided to dig through records looking for pranks, and then also just looking for ghost sightings. And the ghost sightings on Texas Road will indeed go back to 1968, according to articles from the Windsor Star, at least sightings of this spectral female character. This is also what I unearthed. According to a July 19th, 1968 edition of the Windsor Star, an article detailed how a group of teenagers were caught using a makeshift contraption to scare travelers who were traveling across the road. This prank resulted in several people claiming that they had seen a headless woman wandering Texas Road. Despite this evidence, ghost hunters still continue to flock to the area at night. In fact, even the very next night after this article was published, there were dozens of people who flocked to the roadside to catch a glimpse of the headless woman, much to the chagrin of law enforcement and local residents. There's no recorded instances of people seeing this headless figure before this night, and it looks like everything points towards the origin of this particular myth being a hoax, since there's no records of any decapitations leading to fatality. Rather than not leading to fatality, I don't know how that would happen, but this seems to prove from the get-go, at least this particular haunting tale was a hoax. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that definitive enough proof for you for this legend, or how do you feel about it?
For my perspective, I feel like, yeah, I could see it being like that. I haven't personally heard a lot or very much about a headless woman in white back there. It's more of just, there's an eeriness back there. So if this was built on a hoax and it sort of, excuse the pun, died over time, then I could buy that, because I don't think there's, based on what you just shared, there's not a lot of concrete evidence to support that this woman died and her spirit's lingering, looking for her head, which I don't really, as someone who does believe in there's something after, I don't believe actually would happen. I think you would, pass whole. So I never really bought that from the beginning, but I still believe, though, that there is something back there that does make you feel off, but I think it's different people go out there to experience different things, right?
Oh, I'd agree with that. And I think also maybe that eerie feeling, that sort of tangible feeling of unease that's engendered in that area might have actually motivated these kids to do it, because what's a better place to do it than on a creepy site where people already reported being frightened?
Absolutely. I know there's last few years that pre-pandemic, people would still flock out there Halloween time because there's always these notices from the cops saying, don't, like, you're trespassing, don't go out there. So if it's just they did it around Halloween, say, and then it's just year after year, it's come quote unquote tradition, then I would be more leaning towards, okay, it was a hoax from the 60s and people just kept going with it.
Erica, we want to thank you so much for joining us.
Any other time you want me to come and talk about anything paranormal, I will jump at it.
Now, me and Dave are going to be doing a two-part special, and we're going to be talking about another legend of Texas Road a little bit later on a next edition of Fiction or Nonfiction, so listeners are going to want to stay tuned for that. But Dave, since we have Erica here, what's that I hear? Is that the rustling of a random Dave question?
Not yet. Oh, here it is.
I'm sorry.
My random fact is about, yes, you guessed it, cloning.
Of course.
Just like you were all thinking. I know it.
We're going to talk about Dolly the sheep?
We are.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's true. Okay, good night, everyone.
No. That's not, we're going to reference that. But, so many people know the first cloned thing was Dolly the sheep, right?
I thought it was that Velociraptor from Jurassic Park.
That's
Was that next?
We'll talk about that another time.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So, yes, Scottish scientists cloned the very first animal, a sheep named Dolly, in 1996. This was a news story. They figured it out after lots of testing and stuff like that. But here's another story I have for you, okay? This is about a human clone, okay? Several fertility doctors around the world maintain that there has been a clone of a human baby. This occurred in December of 2002. Bridget Bosselier held a press conference in Florida announcing the birth of the first human clone named Eve. A year later, Bosselier, who directs a company set up by a Raelian religious sect, has offered no proof on whether this baby exists or not, let alone that she is a clone. So, is this true or not true?
Is it a clone of Eva Mendes?
No.
Oh, okay.
But did this actually happen? Has there been a human clone?
My brain went to, I call BS.
Okay.
Given the date, 2002, I don't think we would have had the technology for that yet. And if we did, now I'm questioning a lot of other things.
Okay. Okay, Adam.
I think conceivably we could have developed the technology for human cloning at that point. However, I just don't see organizations having the financial resources in order to do that. And I think because of all of the government red tape and regulations that would go around with any sort of doctoring of human DNA and tissue, I just don't really see it happening. So that's why I'm going to say I believe it is fiction.
All right. So you are both correct. But here's what's interesting about this. This was actually a news story, and it was on NPR in 2002. My
beloved NPR?
So if you look it up, there's a news story and a picture of this woman who claims, yes, I have the first human clone baby named Eve, but she has never once provided proof. So therefore, the story, I guess, kind of died there. It was reported by Joe Palca of NPR back in 2002, and this was like a big announcement. But again, there was no proof. It was a news story. You can look it up. Just a little bit more I wanted to reference when you were talking about government red tape and stuff. There are several laws in place to ban the use of federal money for human cloning and research. There's all kinds of things in the way to prevent that because people could use it for maybe nefarious means. But yeah, until then, like people, according to what I read here in this encyclopedia that I've referenced several times.
But why don't we give the name for it again? It's a book that you've borrowed from Windsor Public Library, and also listeners, you can borrow by going to our website.
Inventions and Inventors. There's 2 volumes, and there's a section here on cloning. There's a section here on people who kind of developed the cloning techniques that created Dolly the sheep, and a little bit about the impact of what happened since that happened.
There was a recent news article about would you or would you not clone your pet if given the opportunity?
Yeah.
And I think it generated a little more discussion before it kind of went away again. But that seems to be what pops up a lot is if you can clone Fido or your cat.
There's also a story here from National Geographic. 2 beagle puppies were successfully cloned in Seoul, South Korea. These 2 dogs were cloned with biopharmaceutical technology and a company that specializes in stem cell-based therapeutics.
Well, my question is, the NPR article that you referenced, was it simply telling the story, reporting that someone had claimed?
Yeah, so there's a story.
So it wasn't actually reporting that there was a successfully...
Well, it said that this person claims there's a successful clone, and there's even a picture of the person, and there's a little bit more detail in the article than that. But it also says she can't prove it. She's claiming this so confidently, but has never provided proof.
So it sounds like it was more of a secondary source.
Yeah, well, they speak with her, they try to back up with information, but there's nothing there. It is a story on NPR from 2002, so it is 20 years old.
Now, I will say, this is going to our discussion about information literacy. I think oftentimes people would see an article like this and post it, especially with how social media is now. I think that would just become viral, and people would probably put in a comment section, see, here is proof that humans can be cloned. Meanwhile, the actual article is articulating that someone is claiming to have cloned a human being, not saying it's actually performed.
It's a good idea to read the whole article, not just part of the article, which happens.
I want to thank you all for joining us on this edition of Fiction
or Non-Fiction.
Now, for the information that I performed the research on, you can actually find those old newspaper articles as well as our newspaper archive online by going to our website, windsorpubliclibrary.com, and if you need some assistance in locating research information, please consult our librarians. You can even give us a call at 519-255-6770. Erica, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
This was so much fun.
Well, hopefully
Anytime.
It wasn't too scary, not too spooky.
Absolutely not. I contained myself, but like I said, I could talk about this for hours.
Well, make sure, listeners, that you tune into our next episode where it is part 2 of our Texas Road special where me and Dave investigate yet another haunting. Until then, I'm Adam.
I'm Dave.
And this has been Fiction
or Non-Fiction.